Hello, today we're going to talk about solving one-step equations with integers. So before we get started with solving equations, we want to look at some reminders about working with integers. So remember, when you're adding or subtracting integers, a number line can sometimes be helpful. So remember, when you're using a number line, if you are going to add, you want to move to the right on the number line. If you want to subtract, you need to move to left on the number line. So the first example is 6 plus 3. So you start at the 6, move 3 to the right, and you end up with an answer of 9. The second example is negative 6 plus 3. So starting at negative 6, moving 3 to the right and getting an answer of negative 3. And the last one, negative 6 minus 3, starting at negative 6, going 3 to the left and getting an answer of negative 9. Remember, when you're multiplying and dividing, you need to remember your set of rules. And so if you are multiplying or dividing with the same signs, two positives or two negatives, those will end up being a positive answer. If you are multiplying or dividing with different signs, so one positive and one negative, your answer is going to be negative. Steps for solving any one-step equation. We're going to follow a set of steps every time. So before we get into the steps, we want to look at what is the goal of solving an equation. The goal of solving any equation is to isolate the variable. That means to get the variable alone on one side of the equal sign. Remember that your variable is your letter. So for example, if your equation was x plus 3 equals 5, x is the variable. We want to get x all by itself. We're trying to find out, what does x equal? So our first step is we're going to identify the operation being done to the variable. Our next step is to identify the inverse operation or the opposite operation to the one being done. Our third step is to apply the inverse operation to isolate the variable. And finally, we're going to check our answer. I will go through these steps with an example. So our first example is b minus 5 equals negative 8. So before I start, I want to divide my equation into a left-hand side and a right-hand side. So wherever our equal sign is, I'm going to draw a line underneath it. It's just going to help me remember what is starting on the left and what is on the right. So my first step says I need to identify the operation being done to the variable. So remember, my variable is b. What is being done to the b? And I've got a minus 5, so it's b minus 5. The operation being done is subtract 5. My second step is to identify what is the opposite of subtracting 5. The opposite of subtracting 5 would be to add 5. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5. It's important to remember that whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other side. So our left-hand side and our right-hand side always have to be the same. So if I add 5 to the left, I also have to add 5 to the right. So I add 5 on both sides. On the left-hand side, subtract 5, add 5, those cancel each other out, and I'm left with just a b. And on the right-hand side, negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. So this tells me my answer is b equals negative 3. My last step, though, is I need to check my answer using substitution. So I'm going to take that negative 3, and I'm going to substitute that in for b, because we're saying that b is equal to negative 3, so I can replace the b with a negative 3. In order to check my answer, I need to make sure the left side of my equation is equal to the right-hand side of my equation. So if I look at the left-hand side, I've got negative 3 minus 5, which equals negative 8. And if I look at the right-hand side of my equation, I have a negative 8. So my left-hand side is negative 8, my right-hand side is negative 8. Negative 8 is the same as negative 8, so my answer is right. Let's look at another example. X plus 8 equals 2. I'm going to draw my line to divide the two sides of my equation. I need to identify what is being done to my variable. I'm adding 8. So I want to undo that plus 8. So to undo a plus 8, I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. So the inverse of adding 8 is subtracting 8. And remember, whatever we do to the left side, we have to do to the right side. So minus 8 and minus 8. On the left-hand side, I get left with just an x. On the right-hand side, 2 minus 8 equals negative 6. So my answer is x equals negative 6. To check my answer, I'm going to take that negative 6 and substitute it in for x. So on my left-hand side, I get negative 6 plus 8 is 2. And on my right-hand side, I didn't have any operations to do there. I just bring down my 2, and my left-hand side is equal to my right-hand side, so my answer is right. Example 3, negative 3b equals negative 18. So what is being done to my b? I've got a negative 3 being times by my b. And so the opposite of timesing would be dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. On the left-hand side, I get left with just a b because timesing by negative 3 and divided by negative 3 would cancel. And on the right-hand side, negative 18 divided by negative 3 is a positive 6. I'm going to check my answer. So negative 3 times b should equal negative 18. Negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. And on the right-hand side, I just bring down that negative 18 and they're equal, so I'm right. And our final example, we've got x divided by 2 equals negative 10. The operation being done this time is divided by 2. So the opposite of dividing by 2 would be to times by 2. So I'm going to times the left-hand side and the right-hand side both by 2. On the left-hand side, divided by 2 and then times 2. Those will cancel out. I'm left with just an x. And on the right-hand side, negative 10 times 2 is negative 20. So I get x equals negative 20. And if I check my answer and take that negative 20 and substitute it in for x, on the left-hand side, I get negative 20 divided by 2 is negative 10. On the right-hand side, I just have negative 10, so I bring that down. And because my left-hand side is equal to my right-hand side, I can say that my answer is right. I hope that makes sense, grade 8s. If you have any questions, make sure you go to office hours and check in with your teachers.